Good morning. I'd like to call to order the Strategic Planning, Academic, and System Oversight Committee. And the first order of business will be the approval of the minutes.
So moved.
So moved and second. All those in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Minutes approved. Okay, the first report that we'll have will be from the Workforce Research and Economic Development Subcommittee, which is led by Governor Carolyn Roberts. And where's Governor Roberts?
You want me to go with it, Carol? Good morning, everyone. We have been continuing our work on our Centers of Excellence that have been funded in previous years with these programs, and we had a conference call back on January 20th that was a great call that RE orchestrated that had both the Research Scholarship and Technology Board and the subcommittee of this committee related to economic development together to kind of go through the annual report. And so the first order of business is to move approval of the minutes from that conference call. Here. Second? Anybody else on the call? Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? I guess good. Okay. Then the other thing, just if you guys would please take a note and look at the research board, the report that's being forwarded to us. Dr. Lemon and his staff, I think, have done a phenomenal job of pulling together the report this year and really helping articulate this program over the years, bringing together how the world-class scholars and the grants and the other parts of the program fit together, because this really is a very important initiative to our economic future in the state and helping make the case for that. So I first just want to commend him and his staff, and both the research board and the subcommittee moved forward this report, which needs to come to our board for approval to go to the legislature to make our deadline requirements. And so in doing so, I would like a motion that would allow for us to waive this 2-meeting rule on this one and to go ahead and actually move this report out to the legislature so that we can be on time with the report. And before that motion, if anybody has any questions on the report, Dr. Lemon, and I'm sure we have others in the audience, can try to answer them if you do. Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And again, thank you, Dr. Lemon, for really doing a great job on this report.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. We will now go to the Academic Programs Project Team, which is led by Governor Stan Marshall. Governor Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Academic Programs Project Team met by conference call last week on the 21st of January to review the revised proposal and the revised business plan for a Doctor of Pharmacy program at the University of South Florida. We also reviewed a request for a limited access status for the BFA Bachelor of Fine Arts program in graphic design at the university. Governors Temple and Martin were unable to participate in that call, but Governors Perez, Duncan, and Stavros filled in and did a commendable job. Mr. Chairman, the University of South Florida is requesting approval for a doctoral program in pharmacy for implementation in 2011. You will remember that the full program proposal was reviewed and discussed by the Academic Programs Project Team in October. We thought it would be on the board agenda for November, but the university decided to pull it from that agenda for good reasons. In consultation with our staff, Richard Stevens in particular, the university has revised its 8-year budget projections to clarify funding sources and revise the implementation schedule so that it will now agree entirely with the timeline suggested by the Accreditation Council for Pharmacy Education. In addition, the university has modified its its business plan, and they're keenly aware of the unmet need for pharmacists in this state that continues, and we expect that to be a continuing need for some years to come. So in any case, we have a revised program budget and revised implementation guidelines. This proposal, by the way, has been, and the staff analysis have been posted to the board website, and they're available there. During the conference call, President Genshaft and Provost Wilcox presented their revised plans for implementing the pharmacy program. The plan now calls for the university to fund 3 years of planning out of existing institutional resources and outside fundraising. The university will then seek, through the Board of Governors, beginning in 2011, when the first students are enrolled, to consider the need for further state funds. Governor Perez suggested that the Academic Programs Project team, our team, bring the proposed pharmacy program forward for consideration by this full committee, Mr. Chair, with a positive recommendation. All members in the conference call agreed to do so. So that's what we're ready to do that now, but first let me give to President Genshaft the opportunity to make any comments she might want to in behalf of the program we're considering, the doctoral program in pharmacy.
Thank you. I believe that you, Governor Marshall, and the committee has reviewed this thoroughly, and we appreciate the board's consideration of this. It's very important to the medical complex that we have and to the area, the urban area that we're in. So thank you very much.
Comments or questions? Yes, Mr. Edwards.
I move it be denied. No, I just see if I can get Judy's attention. I move it be approved. I couldn't resist the urge. I visited with them last week, had a tremendous tour. The medical, the overall medical program there from A to Z is phenomenal. I thoroughly enjoyed seeing the pictures of the new buildings yesterday because I got to see those while I was there, and certainly this adds to the overall concept of having at South Florida a medical complex that will go all the way from children, and then they have a Shriners facility there now. Johnny Bird is there, and it just makes good sense, in my personal opinion, to carry that forward.
Mr. Chairman, before we act on that motion, however, I see that we have, Mr. Tripp has a comment, and I want to call on the chairperson who's had a special connection with this program at the university to make some comments, but Mr. Tripp.
When you came and met with me before, I raised the question, sir, about the true need for this program, that I didn't feel there was any documentation that showed that there was really the job growth out there. I note that you did come back with bullet point 4 on key staff observations that said that an 07 report shows that there's an annual job growth rate of 3.31%. That is really outdated material. And in this day and age, with all of the things that are going on, I really question that you answered my question. And I simply am trying to determine whether or not there really is a need in the state of Florida for another school, another program, more recurring dollars, and I don't think that's adequately answered. So I would ask, you know, the feel good is nice, but we're struggling with money. So I just have a question about that.
Thank you, Governor Tripp, for your question, and Let me in answer offer not only the results of the Florida Agency for Workforce Innovation data that were presented by staff in your report, but also a regional study that looks at the southern Atlantic region of the United States and demonstrates very, very clearly that Florida's shortfall is second only to of pharmacists, is second only to North Carolina in the South Atlantic region, and fifth highest in the nation. And clearly what we find is that at the same time as we're struggling with a shortage of licensed pharmacists in the state today, the population of this state does continue to grow. The percentage of...
Actually, the population is declining.
Well...
So, I mean, we need to get our savings right. We know the latest is people are leaving the state. It's not growing.
But in terms where I was going to go here is the percentage of residents 65 years of age and older is number one in the United States. And as we know, aging populations continue to rely heavily on medications and medication-related services to maintain quality of life and to prevent complications from existing chronic conditions. We've also added in your package, and I hope that all board members received, need statements from the retail sector in the Central Florida region, West Central Florida region, from retail pharmacies, from Walgreens and Sweet Bay and several other of our retail partners, as well as from the clinical medical facilities that we partner with, Moffitt Cancer Center, Tampa General Hospital, Children's Hospital, the James Haley VA Hospital, all struggling to find sufficient licensed pharmacists to help or to support delivery of health care in that region. We recognize that there's a demand today, or we assert that there's an unmet demand today. Our concern is how that shortfall is going to grow over the next 4 or 5 years. Realizing that the first graduates from this proposed program will not hit the market until 2015. And while we certainly recognize the dire economic conditions in this state today, we believe it's our responsibility to look not only to meeting today's needs for high-skilled, high-paid workers, but also for the immediate future.
Governor Perez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'd like to second Governor Edwards' motion to approve. And I want to commend the University of South Florida for their change in package and their procedure to pursue this doctoral program. When we looked at it back in November, the funding was very different. I think they heard some concerns and came back. Their board of trustees has made the determination that this is an important program, that there's market need, and I appreciate Governor Tripp's questions. I will tend to rely on the board of trustees because at this point they are allocating their own resources for the first 3 years, or existing resources from other programs. They're making the commitment. To me, this new plan combines a vision for where they want to go as a university and the state's needs with a responsible budgetary approach to getting this done, allocating other resources in place, understanding, and we've got a letter in our package to Chair McDivitt, who has been very involved in this process, and your work has been imperative in getting us to where we are, where there are commitments in place on how the budgeting process is going to work, what happens in the event that there are no budget funds available in 3 or 4 years. University of South Florida has been visionary and flexible in this process, so I would wholeheartedly support this. I commend them for what they've done, and I hope we'll move this through today.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Governor Roberts.
Go ahead.
Thank you. The University of South Florida has been working with this, and I've had the good fortune to meet with them. And when they first came to us, though I supported the value and the need of the program, we all recognize the difficulty of our funding in our state. And they went back, the provost went back to his president and the chairman of the trustees and worked to find money to fund it appropriately to a time that we all believe the state will recover. It's a program that's important. I do believe our state will grow. I'm optimistic on Florida. I'm really optimistic on Florida. And I know in Central Florida there is a shortage of pharmacists. They are working long hours. If any of you are going to pharmacies, you see there are lines and there are people needing to be served. So I do support this program, and I also applaud you, Madam President, and your wonderful provost and your chairman for finding funding to supplement this until the state is able to meet the needs of our universities.
Any other comments from any of the governors?
Yes. I thank President Genschaft and the Provost for taking an opportunity to come in and meet with me about the program. I do have a couple of questions. I certainly think that having a pharmacy program at USF makes sense based upon the other synergy that they have created on a university campus or within that system. But I do have concerns about timing and money. And I just wanted to ask two questions. One, Dr. Sneed, I did get your message. I did not get an opportunity to call you back. And I do want to better understand, and I may have to ask you to come and answer the question, because when we left our conversation, I thought it was an 8-year program with 4 years with a baccalaureate degree and then 4 more years to go into the farm to get your PharmD. And then after talking to staff, I understood it more as a 6-year program. And I think that Dr. Sneed can probably clarify that issue for me. So if you can do that, and then I can ask the provost to come back and talk to me more about what happens if we don't have the dollars. I need that on the record. What happens if we don't have state dollars when you're anticipating us to kick the money in? So if you would, Dr. Sneed first.
Yes, thank you, Governor Parker. The current program as we have it planned right now is a professional program. That's a 4-year program. Now, traditionally, admittance into a program like this will be 2 years out of high school for pre-professional work. The majority of people around the country, however, you don't require an AA degree prior to admission into the professional program, but most people have about 3 or 4 years. Some have a bachelor's degree prior to admission into the professional program. So out of high school, it can be a 6-year program. It potentially can be a 6-year program. However, admission into the professional level is separate from the pre-professional work. Okay, so you have a 2-year minimum pre-professional, and then you move on to the professional, which will be a 4-year degree.
So, okay. When I left Dr. Genschaft and the provost, or when we left each other, I understood it as you get a BS degree and then you have 4 more years in the PharmD program.
That is potentially correct. You can get an AA degree and be admitted into the professional program, the PharmD program. And at that point, it will be 4 more years. So it could be a 2+4 program, or you could be a 4+4 program. But the minimum requirement to meet all the prerequisites in the way of the chemistries and biology and everything required would be a minimum of 2 years prior to admission.
So as you guys have modeled this, your anticipation is that most of your students will have a BS and then do the 4 years? Is that how you've modeled it? Or have you modeled it that's more like a AA then 4?
Well, we've modeled it that we will accept applications for individuals that have met the prerequisites for 2 years. We're not going to require a bachelor's degree prior to admission into the program. It will not be a requirement. However, some of your more competitive students will have a bachelor's degree and an appropriate degree in biology or chemistry or whatever it may be. So we anticipate a large number of people with bachelor's degrees, much like a medical program, to apply to get into the professional degree. Essentially, when you think of the program, you can probably think of it more or less like a medical program. You don't require a bachelor's degree prior to admission into a medical school, but more of your more competitive individuals will have a bachelor's degree prior to admission into a medical program. the Doctor of Pharmacy program with a 4-year professional degree. It mimics the a medical curriculum. But I do want to also include that we will we have partnership programs with area community colleges. We have a very vibrant undergraduate community college at USF. I've been personally contacted by a number of undergraduate students from around the state of Florida that are eager, and I've made them very acutely aware that no, you don't need a bachelor's degree prior to admission. We probably wouldn't want to even trump the admissions requirements for the medical program. However, currently, through accreditation standards and pre-professional curricular standards, you would need probably about a 2-year period of time to meet all of the prerequisite requirements. Most students get that done in probably a 3-year time period.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Provost.
Governor Parker, let me offer some clarification. As Chief Academic Officer of the university, I would anticipate that this will become a very competitive program, and indeed the majority of those students admitted to the program will indeed have a baccalaureate degree. But as Dr. Sneed rightly points out, we have a 7-year degree, a 7-year program for our medical degrees, so not all students moving into that MD program have a baccalaureate degree as they move along that path, and that's not uncommon around the country. But again, I think we anticipate that this is going to be a competitive program, and in order to be admitted, the students are going to have to demonstrate a very successful track record academically, and that's going to include receipt of a baccalaureate degree. Let me move on to your second question. That is, what happens if the economy in the state of Florida doesn't pick up by 2011? And as Governor Roberts rightly points out, that the University of South Florida has made a commitment to cover the costs of all planning over the next 3 years to move this program toward readiness for enrolling our first class in the fall of 2011. Because of that, we plan to come to the Board of Governors requesting enrollment funds as part of our legislative budget request in advance of the 2011 legislative session. At that point in time, and that would be to support the first class of 50 students projected to enter in the fall of 2011. At that moment in time, if the Board of Governors doesn't have a level of comfort in supporting that legislative budget request going forward, we ask that you allow at that point in time the University Board of Trustees to make a decision on the immediate future of that program. That could include a decision to delay implementation or enrollment of the first class of students until the following year, and we would come back seeking enrollment funding at that point in time. Or the Board of Trustees could consider finding alternate sources of funding within the university to jumpstart the support necessary for that first enrolled class. That could include additional private fundraising, private funds. It could include reallocation of funds and the related FTE within the university from other programs. But we believe, as I think Governor Perez has suggested, that that's a decision that would best reside with the University Board of Trustees.
I agree with Governor Perez that it's a decision that resides with them. I just know that my concern is that what tends to happen around here is that once the ball is rolling, there's this compulsion, whether we have the money or not, to keep it going. And what I'm looking for is some commitment, and I look to Dr. Genshap because I probably won't be here. I look for some commitment from yourself and from your board chair, and hopefully from my colleagues, to understand that if we don't have it, that it's going to be okay to delay it.
That's why
Okay.
we got this letter of commitment from the university.
My hope is that all of the board members have had an opportunity to review a copy of the letter sent to Chair McDivitt from President Ginshaw, duly signed, underscoring that commitment and realization.
I've seen the letter. I just wanted something out loud so it's on the record and it's clear that in addition to that, that we don't feel that once because that's what tends to happen. We kind of feel the ball is rolling, we got to keep it moving. So in order for us to be responsible, it seems to me that we should be very clear as we're working together with the university and the board that yes, we think it's a good thing, that yes, there's a lot of synergy at USF4, but based upon our economic times now, that we're going to sit back and make sure it's something we can afford to commit to as a system, or if the system can't, that the board is committed to dig down deep until the system can make the contribution. So that's what I wanted to make clear.
Okay, Governor McDivitt?
Yes, I just want to be brief. A couple of things. I do want to thank the University of South Florida for working with us because I had all of the same concerns that Governor Parker just expressed, particularly the credibility of this board in approving a new program that does have the potential for significant expense going forward. They worked very well with me to try to readjust their business plan, did a lot of work on it, and were good enough to reduce this commitment to writing, which I'm asking be part of the minutes of this meeting so that it is clearly on the record, because you're right, things tend to just roll on like a bus because we will have new people here, and I think that staff needs to flag things like this, that there's times to take another look, and so I would ask that that be tickled on somebody's file. As to Governor Tripp's concern about need, I can only tell you that anecdotally, I come from a family that's got 7 pharmacists in it, my cousins and their children, and they complain constantly about the lack of qualified pharmacists in Florida. So I've got to assume, given all the letters that we have, that there is a big need. And that's why I was very hopeful that we could come to a resolution as to how to get this program going, because it does offer an opportunity for 6-figure jobs right away for kids coming out of college. And I think that's very good for our economy. We hope it all works out, but at least we have an opportunity with this to allow the program to begin its accreditation process and planning process and take another look at the appropriate time, as we should be doing, by the way, with almost every program we have. But I appreciate all the work that was done of the members of the board as well as the university.
Okay, Chancellor and then Governor Stamos and Marshall.
Mr. Chair, if I could just ask Provost Wilcox for the record, so it's entered in, is there a criticality or threshold in terms of the minimum number of students that it would be optimal to start the program with? So you've identified 50. I mean, could it be 25? Could it be 28? How do you arrive at the number of 50? And I'd like that to be in the record as well, because that may be an issue around which some discussion would turn in a few years.
In answer to your question, Chancellor Rosenberg, we determined that 50 would be the base, but in the case of changing economic realities in this state, in fact, it's scalable, but I would argue scalable up. That one way of accommodating a shortfall of state appropriated dollars, in fact, would be to increase the number of the size of the class more rapidly, to rely or depend even more greatly on tuition dollars. But certainly 50, in order to leverage the efficiencies out of the business plan and the program as presented, we would not see ourselves dropping below 50 as a baseline for the first class. And as you know, we look to ramp that up 75 in the second year, 100 the third year, through, and then it becomes steady state, so that by the 6th year we will have 400 pharmacy students, PharmD students enrolled.
So if there weren't funding sufficient to support 50 students, then that would be a bright line that this board could use in 3 or 4 years to determine whether or not a request could be made through the LBR.
Not necessarily so, because as I presented earlier, we would ask our board to look to alternative sources of funding, which could be increasing the tuition. And you'll note in this business plan we have significantly revised the tuition level up to a little over $15,000 in 2011. Now that falls short of the $26,000 that private institutions are currently charging, but significantly higher than the current price position at the University of Florida or Florida A&M University. We do believe that there's some room in there for tuition adjustments if that became necessary in 2011. And we also recognize that there are other sources of funding, and we believe sincerely that approval of this proposal today will significantly help our private fundraising opportunities, because we've heard from many of our retail pharmacies that they're eager to support us, but at this moment in time we're not able to commit to them that we have an approved program.
Thank you.
Governor Summers.
I want to commend President Genschaft and Ralph Wilcox, Provost, for, in my opinion, substantiating the need for the pharmacy school and for pharmacists. Speaking as a senior citizen, I spend a lot of time with pharmacies, and I'm going to tell you, we have a shortage. We do need pharmacists, and I think the need is obvious. It's been supported. I'm going to add one more thing. Having raised almost over $600 million for universities through foundations that I've been involved in, I can assure you that when the wisdom of this Board of Governors, when you approved FIU and UCF for medical schools, because we had a need for doctors, I can tell you that having a medical school and having a pharmacy school helps in raising money for foundations. Education cannot do it alone. There's such a tremendous need of funding, and we all recognize that. And I assure you that medical schools and pharmacy schools bring more funds to universities, and it adds to the foundation results. We do need them. We have a need for the pharmacy school. I support it completely, and I just know that the wisdom of this committee and board will substantiate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Governor Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we're ready for that vote. I would say only in summary that the Academic Programs Project Team was greatly influenced by the answers to the questions so aptly raised by Governor Parker and others, that there needs to be a what-if plan in place. And we need to bear in mind that if the what-ifs all occur and there's a need to go back to the legislature for money, that request must be approved by this board before it goes forward. So I think the flexibility they've built into the program is commendable, and I would only say in behalf of the project team that we are comfortable with their request. We've taken note of Norman Tripp's very legitimate concerns, but with that I think we're ready to vote, and you've heard some favorable comments.
Before we vote, I want to make sure that all of our board members have an opportunity to weigh in on this very important decision. So Governor Zachariah.
You know, in this particular issue, I have mixed feelings. There is no question that USF is a great fit to have a pharmacy school. If you put your emotions aside, I talked to the Vice Chancellor at the Nova University in Fort Lauderdale, where they have a large pharmacy school. And they said for the last 20 some odd years, 85 to 90% of the graduates have a job while they are in school. The other 5 to 15% of the students do their postgraduate training in pharmacy, or they go to an MBA. and almost better than 95%, 95 to 99% of the kids graduate from the school have a job. And most of the major employers are not hospitals. They are Walgreens, Walmart, CVS, Navarro, Target, and Kmart. I don't know if Kmart is going to be around, but they all do the hiring. And any decision that we make today has a long-term consequences. If you put the emotions aside, and when I talked to the chancellor, he said the number of applicants being offered jobs in school right now, the numbers are reducing. Probably because, it'll take a couple more years to figure out why it is reducing. Is it because are we getting saturated by, these are facts, are they saturating by the number of pharmacists, or is it because of the slumming economy? There's a lot of uncertainties in the economy. I don't have to preach to you about that. And my concern is only about the timing. I think it's an excellent school. I think pharmacy will be a great fit. But right now, no one can predict how long it's going to take, what the consequences are going to be 3-4 years down the road as far as the economy is concerned, what the job opportunities will be for the pharmacists. Right now it is good, but there is a declining number of offers while kids are still in pharmacy school compared to 2 years ago. So I just want to caution, and you need to put the emotions aside and saying, there's no question it's a great fit. There is no question that pharmacy is a school and it does bring money to the university. But you got to take into the fact that even the existing university, if you talk to the chancellors or vice chancellors, they tell you the number of hires during the training program is decreasing. The cost is yet to be decided whether it is economy or maybe it is getting saturated. Whatever the case may be. I just want to bring my attention.
Okay, Governor Martin and Governor Duncan.
Thank you, Governor Martin. I just wanted to make one quick comment, and speaking with my colleague over at the University of South Florida, Student Body President Greg Morgan, the students at the University of South Florida are in support of this PharmD program. However, I urge the University of South Florida, when they refer to other sources of funding, that they do not divert any student academic support dollars to this PharmD program, because we as students cannot afford to continually divert funds from our academic support. Thank you.
Governor Duncan.
My comment will be very brief. Obviously, being from the Tampa Bay area, I very much support this program, and I think there is tremendous regional support, both from the business community and the academic community and just basically all around. And while I fully appreciate, and I think we've all spent a lot of time asking a lot of questions prior to this meeting, I think we've done everything within the university has done everything within its power, and I think we have a responsible vote here that we can make that, addresses those contingencies, and I want to fully support this motion.
Very good. And before I call the question, normally we, based on the new procedure that we had developed under Governor McDivitt, chair, said items that are presented at committee level then go to the board the following meeting. I think there's a sense of urgency, if I'm not correct, to have this heard today. So could the motion be amended for the consideration for today's board meeting?
So done.
Okay. Okay, call for the question. All those in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those not in favor? Motion passes. Governor Marshall, want to continue committee report?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now we want to address briefly the limited access program calling for the award of a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in graphic design, also proposed by the University of South Florida. This proposal has also been reviewed by the project team. We think it's a commendable program. The limited access part may deserve a word of explanation. It's a limited access program because of the nature of the requirements of the students. They're required to prepare and present a portfolio demanding considerable time and effort, and it also makes serious demands on the faculty as well. If there are other comments or questions on that, we would be glad to receive those now. I'm sure the President and Provost would be glad to speak to that. If not, Mr. Chair, I recommend that we move that on to the Board of Governors for their approval.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay. All right, next item. All those in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
And then, Mr. Chairman, I think you just spoke to the other issue, that of moving this on to the Board of Governors for consideration now. Is that what you,
Yes.
I think, took care of that?
Okay. Any other?
Let's see, let me see if we need to take note of, we discussed the prudence of suspending the established timetable for submission and approval of doctoral proposals because of existing and projected budget reductions. It was agreed that the staff should issue the schedule for call for proposals to be considered at the June board meeting. And each proposal can then be evaluated on its own merit with regard to the university and Board of Governors' priorities and within the context that the budget situation we may have to deal with at that time. If that's all been taken note of, Mr. Chairman, my report is complete.
Thank you, Governor Marshall, for your report. We will now move to the baccalaureate degrees in the system structure project team. And Governor Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've asked the Commissioner to make a presentation on 2 issues for us today, on which he has actually taken the lead. Therefore, an update on the Florida college system as well as the Readiness, Access, and Success initiatives. The first item he's going to present on is the Florida college system. You recall it at our September committee meeting, the Commissioner gave us a status report of the reports being done on a newly created college system. One was by a task force for which he was actually chairing, and the other by the group of presidents from the pilot project created by the legislature. Both reports have recently been completed and submitted to the State Board of Education, legislature, and the governor's office. So I'm going to ask Commissioner if you would go ahead and start with the presentation regarding the reports on the Florida college system, task force and the college system, I guess, pilot project, and bring us up to date on that. I'd ask the board, I guess, as we're reviewing this information, to be thinking about strategically how we can work together to ensure the increased production of baccalaureate degrees. Commissioner.
Thank you very much. My pleasure to bring an update again on this particular effort. While I do the beginning comments, I'd like to ask Dr. Will Holcomb to come to the podium if you could. Will's right here. Will is Chancellor for Community Colleges and State College System, and has really taken a leading role in both of these reports, the task force report and the pilot school report that has just recently been completed. Both of these have been completed. Both have been presented to the State Board of Education and have been delivered to Speaker of the House, President of the Senate, and the Governor's Office for their review and consideration. Both the reports outline a structure that would be in place to permit historically community colleges to migrate to a state college system that would allow, with approval process, historically our community colleges to offer 4-year degree programs with some limitations and so forth. We have some differences between the 2 reports, modest differences around some of the approval process, and some differences between the 2 recommended funding mechanisms that you find in both reports. Both reports still call for the governance structure to remain with the State Board of Education, and that's a common feature of both. Both reports are now in the hands of the legislature, and really is a body that will have to deliberate and make some decisions about how this will go forward. But Dr. Holcomb, if you want to get through some of the details on both reports and how they're similar and how they're different, would be good. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Commissioner, Madam Chair, Governors, Chancellor. It's good to see you this morning. I'll do it in capsulary form and then be glad to respond to any questions that you have. I know you have a full agenda this morning. The 2 groups, the task force chaired by the Commissioner, also President Genshaft served on the task force and in fact chaired one of the subcommittees. Judy, thank you for your good work. It was broadly representative of both the state university system, the ICUF institutions, and the proprietary baccalaureate degree institutions in the state, as well as our community college presidents. The state pilot group was the 9, as the Commissioner indicated, the 9 college presidents that were delineated in the legislation this past year. And they began their work in June. The task force began its work in August and September, and both concluded in time for the State Board to consider last week. As the Commissioner said, there are a lot of similarities in the reports that are very important. The maintenance of local control with boards of trustees, I know an issue that this board knows well, and yet the task force concluded that statewide program approval by the State Board of Education was a necessary component, and I could see from your deliberations this morning you also think that's an important part of governance in our state. The pilot group differed on that point. They recommend that the initial approval be done by the State Board of Education, but that subsequent approvals be done by local boards. And so that is, I would have to say that's the most significant difference in the two reports. And my guess would be that going forward, that might be the issue that will garner the most discussion. One of the things that both groups reiterated in several ways during the report and made recommendations that I hope this group would concur with, and that is the primacy of the 2+2 system in the state of Florida. That not only in the past but in the future, that will be the main avenue for students from our college system to gain access to a baccalaureate degree. You'll note in the information provided to you that the baccalaureate degrees that have been approved thus far by the State Board are all directly related to employment and fall into 3 general areas: education, nursing, and applied technology. And I think that our State Board of Education, can't speak for the Commissioner and the Board, but that's a high priority for them to make sure that all of these programs are justified in the job market and are needed and can be offered by our institutions. The task force report also strengthens, I think, the coordination in the proposal process between the proposing college and their related public and private universities. It also calls for consultation between the chancellors prior to consideration by the State Board of Education. We think that's a good move. The pilot college on that point continues the requirement for cooperation and consultation among the institutions, but does not have a provision for consultation at the state level at this point. Let me see if there are other points you might be interested in. One that, well, 2, I think that actually mirror some of the work that we saw you do as you consider university programs statewide. And that is that we want the institutions to give us a strategic vision of where they are headed with these programs. Not just a program and then another program. What is it a cluster? Is this going to be an area of emphasis? And is that area of emphasis needed in the community and needed in the job market? The second would be to tie more closely any request for funding and FTE production in our institutions. Again, mirroring the kind of appropriation that your universities receive, where there is a designated number of FTE for the funding. We currently don't operate that way at the lower division because of our open door admissions. But we think it's appropriate that that should be done at the baccalaureate level. And so I would suggest maybe I stop there. I think those are the principal points for discussion that might be of interest to this board. If there are others, please, I would be glad to talk about them.
Yeah, I'd just add one last point. Again, you can elaborate, Dr. Holcomb, if you like. The funding structure that's recommended is the difference between the two reports. The pilot report recommends an 85% of the university funding base to derive their funding for the baccalaureate program. The task force recommends a start with the base of the community college funding and build up. I believe the figure is 35%
Yes, sir.
Of the community college. So it's a different starting point. Might not mean a lot right now, but over time it might migrate to mean a great deal on how these are structured up. And then, again, these are differences between the two reports, and are now subject to the deliberation of the legislature. I would share also, we've been at this process of baccalaureate approval since 2002. So we've been at it for a while. In the absence of legislation, by rule and so forth, we've been granting approval for programs. We have a significant number of programs out there currently in a significant number of institutions. Part of overall population of community college students is a relatively small number, but if you put the graph up against student enrollment, you'll see that the increase over time is a fairly dramatic increase in participation. We're up to around, the number right off the top of your head, about 800, 700 that are currently engaged. What the number of
we have in 07-08 we had 5,300 students enrolled, and we anticipate in 08-09 somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,000.
7,000.
Yes, sir.
Difference of a zero. Anyway, so that's why Will's here. So the growth is pretty significant. I think one of the other interesting factors that was brought to my attention in the process of this work is who is coming to our community colleges to earn baccalaureates. It's a rather unique population. It's very, in many respects, very similar to what you see the student population going to community colleges today. It is more 35 to 45 age. Why don't you give a definition a little bit about that?
Yes, it actually is very interesting to take a look. Right, since we kept keeping data on this starting in 2004 and continuing today, we have far more students enrolled who are over 25 than under 25, and we have more students enrolled who are over 35 than we do in the 18 to 25-year-old age group. And that very much mirrors the working place-bound folks who we serve in our lower division programs.
I believe a fairly diverse population of
yes,
students.
Yes, sir, also.
So again, it's hitting a different, perhaps a little bit of a different group. So, any questions?
Yes, I guess we'll, Madam Chair, and then Governor Edwards.
Commissioner, I got a couple questions. You say these two reports are at the legislature. Does that mean that they're supposed to now adopt some legislation that would implement in some fashion all or some of those recommendations?
These two reports were called for out of last year's legislature. And what was expected is that they simply be reported to the legislature. What they choose to do with now will be up to the legislative leadership.
Well, I know, but is there any, this is what has confused me all along, and I must admit I've never taken the time to pull the bills out and read them, so I could have probably answered my own question if I'd have done that. But do these reports have anything to do with whether the state college system proceeds, or is it alive and well as we speak?
As I said, it's been operational since 2002, the establishment of baccalaureates.
No, that's a different story.
Right. So
Yes.
what the legislature called for was the reports, and that's the extent of it. It's up to the legislature then. This is not a department initiative. This is a legislative initiative.
Okay, I'll ask you after
Madam-
because I'm not saying it right.
Madam-
Well, I had one more thing.
Response to that.
Well,
Okay.
Did you have a response for concern?
Madam Chair, if I could make a shot at that. I think part of the problem that we've had since the passage of the legislation last session is terminology, continues to be terminology. The Florida Community College System was renamed the Florida College System. Same institutions, but just renaming the system. And the term state college was introduced. Both reports recommend the definition, which was one of the charges that the legislature gave to both groups, that the definition of state college be that the institution may use that term if they've been approved and accredited for baccalaureate degrees, but naming remains a local Board of Trustees prerogative. And so you'll see in our system we have a couple state colleges, we have a few colleges, and then we have community colleges. So the Florida college system encompasses 3 different names. Actually, that's not true. We actually have 1 junior college as well. So we have in total 4 different named institutions. They all offer 2-year degrees. They're all open door institutions, and 13 offer baccalaureates.
And the pilot group. Now,
Yes, ma'am.
in my world, a pilot usually connotes you're going to do something for a period of time to figure out whether it works, and then you have recommendations. But I gather that's not what this pilot group is doing.
Now, actually, I think that is what they're doing.
Is.
They, not all of them are state colleges. They didn't automatically change their name to state college. 1 or 2 of them did, the others didn't. The recommendations going forward is that naming be a local issue. And if, I don't know, I agree with the Commissioner, we don't really know what the legislature is going to do with this report, but I think if they would adopt what the task force has recommended and the pilot group has recommended, that the pilot project itself would go away.
The difference of the 2 reports that concerned me the most was the one concerning programs and what happens in the future. As I understand it now, the State Board of Education approves programs for each of the local colleges that want to go there. One of the reports I understood you to say for all future programs transfers that authority to the local board. That is the part that seriously concerns me, having been involved with this for many, many years. If the local boards have complete control over their programming, they're going to take the most popular. You're going to have all kinds of duplication. Does the Board of Education have a position on this, and are you going to actively advocate that position?
The state board had both reports presented at its last regular board meeting and did adopt the task force report as gave the task force report their support. So, and that report is the one that would require initial approval and subsequent approval to come to the state board. That has been communicated to the legislative leadership and the governor's office.
Any other questions? Governor Duncan?
So one of the things that we've been looking at with Shared Services Committee was the library system and just the communication and the things that are happening already between FCLA, which is the Florida Center for Library Automation, and the College Center for Library Automation, CCLA. And I think we're making good steps on making sure that those 2 systems stay together. I guess I would just implore that if we end up with any other in-between versions or models, that we don't go to a third library system, and that we work within the confines of what we're doing and kind of continue to expand on any opportunities to better leverage our existing resources as it relates to libraries.
Yes.
So as you guys are continuing to look at that, if you see anything from our side that we need to be looking at or addressing, I think that's a very important issue for all of us, and the better we can leverage those resources throughout the state.
Governor Duncan, I couldn't agree with you more. That CCLA is very much committed to working with the CLA, and we ought to look for ways to even do more together. One of the points that we went past, Commissioner and I, perhaps inadvertently here, is that both reports recommend we all remain part of the same system, that none of the colleges break off into some separate third-tier system, which was a very much a concern when we first read the legislation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think your point's well taken. If I could speak further about that, some really important issues around this, I think, that are going to be ultimately decided based on how governance gets ultimately decided, how funding gets finally decided, and how program approval gets finally decided by the legislature. One is our ability to coordinate and cooperate. Dr. Holcomb mentioned the 2+2 and make sure that we preserve that. That is vital to this state. That's vital to the community college interest, that's vital to the university interest, and most importantly, it's vital to our students' interests, our customers. And so we need to guard to protect that. It could very easily get in the cogs of this transition and be a very negative byproduct of this if we're not careful on that. The other is we really do have a premier community college system. Last 6 years we've led the nation in degree production. We have this last year the largest number of degrees awarded to African Americans in the nation. We have the largest number of degrees awarded to Hispanic Latinos in the nation. We want to make sure as we migrate, and this is one of the big concerns of the state board, and I think of the president's also, that as we pick up a broadened mission for these institutions, that we don't lose the quality of what we have already on the ground. And so there is a keen balance on some major elements that really deserve protecting here in Florida.
Governor Stravis.
Yes, from my first meeting with Board of Governors, thank you, Madam Chair, I've been hearing the Pappas report say that we lack baccalaureate degrees in the state of Florida for the size of state that we are. And I know that one of the recommendations was the community colleges. I serve on many committees with the President Carl Cutler, the president of St. Petersburg College. And I can assure you that in our shortage of teachers and nurses, they're making a difference. They are very strong in nursing and in education. I believe also they work very closely, Judy Genschaft at the University of South Florida. So I see a very good thing happening here, Commissioner.
Chancellor.
Could you just speak a little bit? Could you speak a little bit to the open door policy and how that might be affected, or any of the schools, especially in the pilot project, anticipating any change in that?
Thank you, Governor Tripp. No. In fact, there are several things that in the short run, as we begin to develop the baccalaureate degree capacity to assure that doesn't happen. For one, the colleges must keep any baccalaureate appropriations that they have from the legislature separate from their lower division operating budget, and it must be audited and accounted for separately. So the commingling of funds is not an inducement, if you will, for students or for institutions to move away from the traditional open door mission. Also, we track the attendance patterns at all of our colleges as part of our accountability, and all of the presidents have signed off, and none of the data we have collected thus far indicate that any of our colleges are doing anything at the lower division other than trying to serve as many people as they can.
Councilman Rosenberg? I'd like to echo the Commissioner's point about 2+2 and the importance of that for the state university system, and to remind the board that your enrollment management strategy that we have discussed since July of 2007 is premised on the notion that we will continue to find space for our AA and eligible AS graduates. The discussion that we had yesterday with our provosts did not raise the issue of transfer, but did raise the overall issue, which we will not address today, but which you may be at some point in the very near future need to address, is that if the budget difficulties continue, what will be the board's expectation as it relates to the overall management strategy of our respective universities? And then that might occasion a more detailed conversation about 2+2. But at this point, we are very committed to ensuring that 2+2 graduates can find a seat in one of our 11 public universities, even if it wouldn't be the one directly of their immediate choice.
Governor Roberts?
Thank you very much, Chancellor, for the report, and Commissioner. I support the 2+2. It's such a success, and I've said many, many times, it's one thing we've done so well in this state and given students such great advantage. My question to you is that as, and I've read your report, as the more baccalaureate degrees are approved on these in the colleges, should we expect the demand for 2+2 for the places in our universities to decline? It appears to me that it just makes sense if you're on a campus and you are taking your courses that you will not be encouraged to stay and continue your coursework at that college. So it isn't something we have to deal with today, but I think the reality is our universities may possibly in the future have less demand for these students on our campuses, and we need to prepare for that in our future planning, all you university presidents.
Okay, we'll track that. We'll like to bring back some research, some hard numbers for you to look at. It could be quite the opposite, that the presence of baccalaureates and a small number of degrees being awarded at institutions increases the number and expectation that would actually increase the demand to go on to baccalaureates that are not being offered on that campus. We find a lot of our community college members are have a lot of issues that are unique. They're a lot more place-bound and so forth. But institutions that we have are offering degrees in very limited areas. And as that grows an interest in lower division and expanded AA, and these students begin to raise their sights to doing more than just simply an AA degree, certainly could expand that vision to not just those three areas, law enforcement, teaching at the elementary level, and whatever, but to other baccalaureates that would be available at a regional university, an area university. So I think you're going to see a different dynamics. We will certainly track that, and I think the call on that is going to be very important, that we do it based on data, not and hard facts rather than assumptions. That our ability to bring more students to baccalaureates is a critical piece, and our lower division has been a key element of that. So we need to be very cautious and careful as we plan that out.
President Benz, I'm sorry, Chancellor.
If I could add just a few things to the Commissioner's comments. I think overall demand for access to the universities from students leaving our system increases, not decreasing. I think we'll see that off into the future, and for the reasons the Commissioner said. By looking over at President Brogan over here, and I recall in my previous life the opportunity to work closely with he and Dr. Catney's before him with FAU to create the partnership campuses, and they exist in a variety of places around the state. And so those baccalaureates and master's degrees are already available on our campuses, provided by the state university system. And I would think it would be very difficult, and I don't expect it at all, that our colleges would want to try and duplicate those. And so the opportunity for more partnerships, I would hope, is wide open between our universities and our colleges in those areas that are far more broad than the limited areas that our colleges will address.
President Benz.
Well, we just ran the numbers at the University of West Florida this year, and our AA transfers are down 10%. We have 2 colleges in our region, and the one in Pensacola Junior College, their board is has approved the request to go to a college. We're very concerned about our undergraduate enrollment, and it's a real serious problem. It is not, what it is it's fostering the students that are in community colleges or former community colleges, which are traditionally place-bound students, to stay placed and to not make the decision to come to the university, and the cost is a factor. So that's a serious problem. It is not fostering enrollment in the state university system. It's fostering staying at home.
Governor Tripp.
Chancellor, do you see any difference, for example, Chipola and Indian River College, where they are more separate and are not joined as much with the university, as opposed to, let's say, FAU and Broward campus, whatever? I mean, there's sort of a natural division there, isn't there? Is there any way to talk about that a little bit? And that may be what President Benz is talking about. I don't know, is your campus joint? It just seems to me that some of these are going to be naturally freestanding colleges just because of the way they're set up, as opposed to others where history or, you built together, so you're joined at the hip. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, sir. I think there will be differences. Our colleges respond to the local environment. That's what we're supposed to do. And in the case of Chipola, for example, it's going to be very difficult. That's a very small college. Yes, there are desires and needs in that community, but the numbers are so small, it's difficult for that college to grow. So challenges there are at both the associate and the baccalaureate degree are in that area. An area like where Indian River State College is a rapidly growing area economically and from a population point of view, and current events notwithstanding. And it's an access issue there for them, and so they may develop more programs than, say, a Broward or Palm Beach Community College, or Miami-Dade for that matter, because of the opportunities. There may also be some very good discussion that goes on between our universities and our colleges about program mix. It may well be that universities and an individual university and a college will decide that one of our colleges should take this major and allow the university to do something else. So there should be, I would hope that there will be more joint planning coming out of this than maybe in some cases we've had in the past.
Could I comment on that same issue? This is on the same issue. As you will recall, at my first board meeting, Florida Gulf Coast University had an RFP out for a branch campus in Charlotte County, which we ended rapidly. But what has happened, and I think this is very, very positive, is Florida Gulf Coast University and Edison State College have reached an agreement to share Edison's College facilities in Charlotte County, tremendous savings in dollars, and to work together to put various programs that are needed in that area. And that certainly is something that I think could be expanded significantly as we learn to cooperate more with each other and to take advantage of the facilities that are already there and underutilized. And that's exactly what they've done. And the provost told us here, I don't think he needs to comment, but my point is that there are some solutions, not solutions, but some opportunities, President Vince, to work with these community colleges and hopefully resolve some of those concerns.
President Genshaw.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I really found it valuable to serve on the task force, and I thought it was a very good conversations that we had. I also wanted to thank Nancy McKee and Dottie Manier for helping out on this task force as well. But I really do want to go back to what the Chancellor had mentioned. There will be some changes. I mean, when you have something that's been working in equilibrium and then that equilibrium changes, it is going to make a difference in the enrollment that we all have. And it's not that it's good or bad, but there will be some differences going on. The key, I believe, is the cooperation that we have between the presidents of the community colleges and the presidents of or state colleges and those of the universities, so that you can have cooperative programs and work together. Let me just remind you, however, that to go to a 4-year requires SACS, that's the accreditation approval. They don't approve whether you just have one program. They approve a community college moving to a state college to have full baccalaureate ability, meaning that if the pilot project task force goes through, that means that the local board can have any baccalaureate programs that they deem as appropriate. If the task force is approved by the legislature, then it does go back through the Department of Education. So that really is a very big difference. And it's a very big difference as to even the, it's not just a quick reaction of, oh, I think I'll offer something, and they get it through their own board. I think going through a board of education makes a difference, just as we go through the Board of Governors. So right now there are 28 colleges in this task force. 13 have been granting or are permitted to go and grant a baccalaureate. We have a 14th that has just applied to offer a baccalaureate in nursing. That's Manatee Community College. So what's happening with the 2+2 program really is changing. It's no longer just 2+2. It's really, now we're having 14 out of the 28 that are offering baccalaureate or might be offering the baccalaureate programs. I'm not saying whether it's good or bad. I'm just saying the landscape is changing. It will make a difference in our enrollment. The task force does offer the baccalaureate programs at a lower tuition rate than we have at the SUS.
Any other questions for the Chancellor, for the Commissioner on this issue?
Governor Park.
Just a quick, I'm sorry. No,
President Brogan and the Governor.
More of a statement, I guess. What Judy was right on, but in the middle of everything that she just said was probably the most pronounced part of all of this, and that is the fact that under our present system, is we're dealing with multiple providers. As mentioned, right now we have 6 different delivery systems for higher education in the state of Florida, from junior college all the way up to comprehensive research universities and everything in between. We are almost completely reliant right now on the relationships that exist between presidents. That's notwithstanding the important role of the local boards of trustees, the boards of governors, the State Board of Education. But because we've never been here before, never done this before, and many have never even conceived of this kind of a morph into this new model, whatever it's going to be at the end of the day, we are truly developing this on the fly based on the relationships of presidents. Now, that's not a bad thing, but it goes back to something that someone mentioned, which is what are we trying to accomplish, and how are we going to know when we get there? What data are we expected to generate as we formulate these relationships? What governance structures will we look to in the future? And I realize the approach we're taking now is let's just move forward and see ultimately what we settle into, and ultimately someone somewhere will say that's it. Or are we going to decide with all of our different delivery systems what the big picture is going to be for years out and how we're going to measure it along the way? The whole idea of delivery systems is access. Remember, the Pappas report was based largely on increasing the access opportunities to the world of the university level, or at least to higher education. One would believe that the system we're moving toward is doing that because we now have many other players who are providing baccalaureate opportunities either through the college program or through the state college program, and yet the question was begged today. Are we providing more access? And clearly, both presidents are correct. It will mathematically have an impact, has to have an impact on the number of students at one institution versus another. That's just by definition. So I guess, and I'll end here, I promise you, I think we've got to, rather than hope and pray that the relationships of our presidents will carry the day and someone somewhere will ultimately say, this has got it right. Right now is when we should be deciding what are the accountability sets that we want to look to and rely on to make sure that this thing is moving forward efficiently and effectively, and that there is always, not just through committee, but that there is always important interface between this governing board, the State Board of Education, the State Board of Community Colleges, et cetera, to assure that we're getting to a place in time where we're all happy with what we end up with when we get there.
Governor Martin.
In terms of cost, I think President Genschaft, you mentioned cost right at the end of your comments, and I was wondering, what is the cost differential between students that will attend to the first 2 years at the college level versus going to one of the universities? What is that cost differential? First question.
You mean the current cost differential between freshman and sophomore at one of our colleges and one of the universities?
Correct.
Mark, what is it? We're about
$30 a credit hour.
Yeah.
Right, Tim?
I would.
And true for junior, senior as well.
Right. So about $30 per credit hour difference.
And then at the upper division, that's controlled by the legislature, and they have set the tuition at 85% of the cost of university tuition.
Okay. And my second comment, what about housing? Is housing addressed at all?
No, and most of our colleges do not have any housing at all. A few have private relationships, but nothing owned by the college.
Could I ask for a point of clarification? I believe that Hillsborough Community College.
It's a private. It is not owned. It's private. It is not owned by the college.
Okay.
Chair McDevitt.
Thank you.
I think Governor Roberts wanted to say something first, and then I'll finish up.
In this discussion, and I think it's a very good discussion, and the reports are interesting, the most important point we have to make is we know that there are limited funds, especially now, and we want to make sure they're used wisely for the education of our citizens and to make sure that they are getting what they expect when they receive a degree. I believe everyone has the same goals. Everyone I've talked to in the legislature, in the college system, we all have the same goals, but we need to to, as President Brogan said, make sure we know what we're moving towards so we're not competing for state dollars to the detriment of the students who are working toward those degrees.
I just wanted to comment to President Brogan's few points. One, I think that it's very important that we manage through this morphing system and not lose sight of the quality aspect of the degrees. And secondly, I wanted to just let everybody know that we are working towards having a couple of joint meetings per year with the State Board of Education. Hopefully the first one will be probably in June following the legislative session. And through that type of activity, hopefully we can develop just our relationships and some guidelines for how we're going to operate, because I think we've learned a lot of things over the last 5 or 6 years before this was formalized into a state college system. And I think what we want to do is to get comfortable with the process and to and I'm going to talk about some of this in my remarks, but this new tuition bill is going to help us, I think, a little bit in eliminating some duplication if we decide that's the right thing to do.
Governor Duncan?
Just one follow-up question for President Brogan or President Genschaft is the equilibrium thing. If the way I look at it is we've got a lot of students we're turning away who are qualified technically now to be entering our universities. It really is probably equilibrium shift on growth versus, I mean, are you really perceiving that you will lose enrollment as a result of this program, or is it that people who maybe aren't getting into your program will use this as an alternative? Help me understand that, because I think we've got such a demand and capacity issue right now that I'm not sure I saw that as us actually dropping enrollment.
Well, all of us can answer. I think President Bentz answered some of that already. I think it depends on the area.
Yes.
And
it's a regional issue.
It's a regional issue in many cases.
Okay.
There should be a reasonable presumption that, and I'll take Indian River State College as a good example, because back to Governor Tripp's point, it's located in an area that we serve, and we serve with satellite campus opportunities. And yet and we have a number of those throughout our service district, as you all know at FAU. Under the present funding model, it's always difficult to extend those services because there's so much redundancy that you have to build in with services and activities. So there's a presumption here, naturally, that now that the legislature has inserted itself in this thing and rather kick-started our new system of higher ed by establishing Indian River State College, and sometimes that's not a bad way to get into change, is to have it foisted on you and then say, well, it's actually good change if we make it that way. What will happen with Indian River State College and Florida Atlantic University on the undergraduate side, reasonably, is that over time we have to plan together so that Indian River State College can say, these are the degree areas that we are going to start with. Because the worst mistake would be to say, we're going to start with a full menu of undergraduate degrees and do them all poorly. And that also has a huge impact on Florida Atlantic University and what we offer. So the reasonable presumption is we will plan together. They will say, we will start with education. And over time, Florida Atlantic University will begin to pull back its undergraduate education programming as Indian River State College begins to take that over. We'll still be the agent of record for graduate programming because they're bound, understandably, to baccalaureate degrees. Then they may move to the next major and the next major, and we will begin to be impacted. So some of this will be a voluntary decrease in our undergraduate enrollment because I use the word morph again, they're morphing into it, we're morphing back out of it and back to the Boca Raton campus. But that's why the planning has got to be done so well so that you don't have duplication of service and you don't have voids in services while all that is happening. The urgency right now because of declining budgets is to make that happen faster, getting into it and pulling out of it. But that's a reasonable presumption is that if you do this properly, there'll just be a change in the balance of how these things are occurring.
Governor Perez?
building on President Benz and President Brogan's comments, and it's more just a question for the Commissioner. I know that you all are following data and collecting an inordinate amount of data in this process. One piece that would be interesting for me is it as President Brogan has just said, and are we simply moving students from one campus to another rather than actually increasing access? Are we seeing more production in four-year degrees by the creations of these vehicles, or are we going to be generating the same four-year degrees that we generated before? We're simply changing the venue. So question one, I'm certain that you're tracking those numbers. I'd love to see those when and as they come out. And question two is, what other metrics are you tracking? Because I'm sure we would all be fascinated with whatever that data comes out to. As you are setting up your metrics now to define the programs, what other elements are you all looking at?
Very good question. I'd be happy to come back and report, or give you a written report at some point. I think those are really the critical questions as we try to engineer the future of this relationship, and so we'll bring some of that information to you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Chancellor Rosenberg.
Fascinating.
Oh, I apologize. Chancellor Rosenberg.
I think some of the questions here directly bear on the responsibilities that this board has to set a direction. And clearly we can't do that in isolation, and that's why Commissioner and the Chancellor are here. We did present to you, staff have done analysis about overall levels of educational attainment for this state and what our objectives should be. Currently at about 27% of our over 18 economically active population with bachelor's degrees. If we're going to move into a top 10 status by the year 2020, then we would need to increase the number of bachelor's degree residents in this state by about 1.5 million. And so therefore, we really should identify a target for where we would like to be in 2020, 2025, and work backwards from that for our delivery systems to see who can do what, understand what the cost is, and then develop our accord with the legislature and the governor around what our overall objective should be for that time period. I think that would help our presidents to sort out what they should be doing and the most efficient use of resources. We don't have that yet. We do have the data, and we did work it jointly with the commissioner's staff. So I think at some point, maybe even, Madam Chair, for your meeting in June, it would be good to have that conversation about where we need to be and work backwards to figure out how we get there.
Madam Chair, I've never quite understood, that's my problem, the real role of the committees that were assigned in statute, et cetera. And so if what I'm about to say is already the way of the world, chalk it off as read the bill, Brogan. But it would seem to me that based on everything we've discussed, we will all go back home and we will allow the three governing entities to do their very best at reframing our system of higher education for the 21st century and hope it all pans out to a great degree. And it's not that we don't talk to one another, that's not my point. But if we're not doing that with the present two committees that have been assigned through statute, isn't there some reasonableness to saying maybe we need 3 members of this Board of Governors, 3 members of the State Board, and 3 members of the Community College Board to form a standing committee along with appropriate staff of each to begin the development of a long-term look at where we want to be and decide an accountability system within that to make sure that we're getting there on an annual basis, that we can then report back to the legislature, for example, that our system of higher ed is going to be providing more access, is going to be more cost efficient, if those are the metrics, among others, that we want to use, to really begin to pull this thing together in a unified way. Because again, I would suggest, while we've got great people working on this at every level, much of this is left to the goodwill and good intent of people who are doing their work, number one, in silos, and then relying on them to talk to other people to make sure that they're pulling it together. That's not a bad way to do business. I would just submit that by putting it together, the 3 governing bodies, we could assure that we were developing a long-term plan and that we were hitting metrics along the way to guarantee all of us that we were getting there the way we should.
So I guess in response to the first part of his question, Commissioner Smith or Chancellor Holcomb, is there anything in place that suggests that there is an avenue for these three entities to speak and kind of direct and work together?
If I would, Commissioner, we had some discussion about that at the task force, and in fact, in staff meeting, Commissioner, we've said, you know, where does this go from here? Obviously, there's some fundamental decisions that the legislature needs to make. For example, if they adopt task force a recommendation with program approval being done at the state level, then that gives the opportunity for us to do better planning more cooperatively at a state level and set up some mechanisms. You know, we had some mechanisms in the state of Florida going back a decade or so ago, and some of those have fallen away, and it may well be that it's time to bring some of those back. The issues here are access and productivity, as Chancellor Rosenberg pointed out, and for both of us at both the associate and the baccalaureate degree level. And not the only change going on here are our colleges offering baccalaureate degrees. The 2+2 system in Florida is also undergoing change as universities have stress, financial and otherwise, and we have to be very careful that the major pipeline for our students coming to your system remains one that's viable and well understood by our students.
Dr. Abel?
If we were a group of investors, which we are since it's our money going into these systems, we would begin with the very basic facts, as Governor Perez has said. How many high school graduates are coming out from our public schools, homeschooling, and private schools? What is the racial and demographic mix, and what is the flow-through? I can only tell you for the SUS, just using a very crude model, percent of total standard high school diplomas in the state of Florida, and FTIC, summer, fall, and spring in the SUS is an incredibly accurate model. And we have watched the number of standard diplomas in Florida drop off at the same time we're spending my money, my taxpayers' money, expanding without the slightest bit of information that we're really meeting a critical need. We may be, but we may not be. But we have the best data system in the state of Florida, the unitary data system, and we could track every single student through the pipeline and see what is the real demand. Chipola, we offered those programs at Chipola. I understand they're a chamber of commerce, they're a small community, they want to feel proud about having their own college. That's fine, but don't say that it's an access issue when 40 miles away and online we're offering the exact same programs. But I cannot understand why this board is going to allow this to go on when the data are sitting there and we can actually build the same kind of model that other states do. We hear about North Carolina, that's a great system. Their system actually breaks it down how many Hispanic students are getting out of college, in which areas, and how they're going to serve their needs. We have better data than they do, and we could do the same thing. So if we want to say that we're an investor, these are our dollars, which they damn sure are, then we ought to pay attention in that way. But if we want to say this is a political issue, which is about 80% it is, then let's make the best of it by getting that information and seeing how we can work together. But until we have that basic information, it's very difficult to say what the real access issues are. Are students really being turned down when school after school admits, say, 8,000 students and 3,000 show up? 8,000 students, in fact, in the SUS, about 50,000 students are offered spots and about 30,000 enroll. So 20,000 were given a chance to attend the school of their choice. So we ought to do the very best we can. Dollars are tough. We're not going to get new tax dollars. There are limited dollars for education in this state, and we ought to take every opportunity to see that they are spent in the most efficient manner possible.
Your comments, Dr. A, will actually lead into the second part of our presentation, which deals with readiness, access, and success initiatives. So hopefully the Commissioner will be able to address some of your concerns before we get to that, when we get to that next topic. But I know Dr. Benz, you had a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the new state college system in Northwest Florida we knew it was going to affect us. And we've kind of done on a regional level what Dr. Abel was talking about and what President Brogan was talking about is joint talking together and having a joint mix and program planning. And so in Northwest Florida, we formed a coalition of presidents of higher education in Northwest Florida, and we've begun to meet on a regional basis. And instead of just competing, what we are doing is to seek what the students need, who is offering what program, how much is online, and I do think that there will be a breakdown, a natural breakdown of what the state, at the undergraduate level, of what state university, at least our state university, should offer at the university level, and what will be cheaper and better and more accessible for the residents of Northwest Florida to get at their local community, state, or a college. And that really has caused us to sit down at the table and to do some real serious planning. And I think that's been very healthy because our goal is to provide an education for the students in our region. What do they want? A second big part of this are the workforce studies that have been done in our region. What are the jobs there that are available, and what are the higher education institutions? Well, how much are they producing in terms of IT? What are the jobs that are available every year, and what are being produced out of all of our higher education institutions? There are serious gaps, and those gaps, I think, are really the roadmap for academic planning, program planning in our region. Because our goal should be to have students, regardless of their age, who want to better themselves and get a better job, to be able to live and work in Northwest Florida at a higher level. And we, higher institutions, regardless of which one of the six we are, should work together to reach so those people, residents, can reach that goal. It's not easy. We've never sat down and talked together that much. We've mainly been in competition for state dollars, but that is sort of the silver lining to this very confused and complex cloud that we're in, and I think it's going to work better. I don't mean to be doom and gloom. I think we can all raise our enrollments in Northwest Florida, where enrollment is an issue. We can all raise our enrollments and serve our students better by almost just working together and having no more money.
Well, I think that I appreciate the comments from the presidents and from the members of the board on this very, very critical issue. I think that earlier, Chair McDevitt mentioned that we are going to plan several meetings with the State Board of Education, and it may be from this, Madam Chair, that maybe we take a little bit further, maybe not just with the State Board, but also with the Community College Board, and attempt to reach some resolution, and maybe we can take the lead on, I guess this is what I'm hearing from...
They don't have a board. It is the state board.
So it is just a state board. Okay, excuse me.
But there's nothing that would preclude us together from forming some kind of coordinating group that would include people from the state college system as well as, your board and our board, and we could try to work on some of these things. At least that's what I had hoped.
And that seems to be the direction of most of the comments. So I trust with your leadership and guidance that would be something that you would add to your long list of things to do as the chair. With that, I think we'll thank the Chancellor and thank the Commissioner for your presentation. I think it's been a very healthy and positive discussion that's going to lead to some very interesting results as we continue to plan what makes best sense for each of the entities and what roles each entity should play in the increased production of baccalaureate degrees within the state. The second presentation, as I mentioned earlier, that we were going to ask, that I've asked the Commissioner to update us on as it relates to readiness, access, and success initiatives. I think that Dr. Abel kind of gave you a great lead right into that part of your report, Commissioner, so if you would go ahead and update us on where we are on that. And just to remind the board, our concern about readiness, access, and success really came out of our Forward by Design initiative because we were concerned that we were doing all this stuff, but we weren't getting students who were ready to actually enter into the system. So if you would update us on that, Commissioner.
Very good. Thank you very much. It is a great segue into this particular presentation. I'd like to start by very brief. I am a data nut, so I'd like to start with a little bit of data and about where Florida is and where we've been our journey over the last decade is certainly not static. We have, if I go back to the nature of our student population, who we are and how they're achieving academically, back in 1996, using NAEP data as a measure, our little fourth graders in mathematics, our fourth graders were 7 points below the national average on the National Assessment of Educational Progress. Nation came in at 62% above basic, and Florida came in at 55% above basic. In 2007, a relatively brief time later in education years, Florida moved to 86% above basic. The nation moved to 81% above basic. So we moved from a 7-point deficit to the nation to a 5-point above the national average on NAEP performance in mathematics as one indicator, and this holds true for reading and 8th grade measures as well. We're showing a strong increase. We're depending on which measure you want to use, we're a majority minority state. Minority performance is extraordinarily important to us. Hispanic students back in 06 and again in 4th grade mathematics, we were 7 points above the national average at 44% above basic. Nationally it was at 37% above basic, and in 07 our Hispanic children moved to 83% above basic versus the nation at 69. We're now 14 points above the national average on the NAEP math measure. So it's the start of I think a bow wave or a sea change in what's going on with our K-12, and we definitely signals that what has happened in the past with some of the energy around college readiness and being prepared to receive a better prepared student population to move on to baccalaureate degree is well warranted. Statistics on advanced placement back in 98, we had 28,000 students that scored a 3 or above on an advanced placement exam. In 08, we had 88,000 score a 3 or above on an AP exam. So our numbers are continuing to grow in all measures in the right direction. 07, 08, there was the Go Higher Florida Task Force. Commissioner Wynn at the time was worked on that particular group with Chancellor Rosenberg and others, and I think laid a very solid groundwork for what we're doing today. Last spring, the governor signed the state of Florida's participation with the America Diploma Project, a project that is designed to better align high school exit requirements with post-secondary entry standards to get what we do in K-12 better aligned with what the universities require for admissions. Nationally, there are 34 states that are participating in that effort, and a lot of various specifics that are being worked on. Certainly, it's led by a very serious discussion around state standards, what we expect our kids to do K through 12. Florida has had a recent revision of many of its standards for curriculum. Legislature last year required further revision and upgrade to those standards. To date, we have newly revised math standards and a revised math sequencing of content, and we are very closely aligned to what is required for post-secondary success. We have revised standards in language arts, reading, and science standards that have been revised and successfully, and certainly will expect more of our students. These standard revisions, these revision of standards, is now being paralleled with a new contract, a revision of our FCAT, our state accountability program, that is currently very active on my desk, and we'll be engaged in that over the next few months, and will ultimately lead to a recentered FCAT that'll be based on the new revised standards for the state of Florida. So we've made progress in the past, dramatic progress. You're seeing an increase in standards and a revision of what we expect of our kids on our foundational measure of FCAT going forward, and a better alignment to post-secondary requirements. We have also done a fair amount of work on post-readiness assessments. What we use currently is an AccuPlacer for some of our decision-making around college readiness. That contract is also up for renewal, and we're reevaluating our positioning with that particular instrument as we go forward. And finally, I would mention perhaps the most profound difference that's going to come at the university system in the near term. Last legislative session, the legislature passed a revised high school accountability program that will dramatically change the nature of the work in our high schools. And currently under state statute, high schools are accountable for student performance and achievement on the 9th grade and the 10th grade FCAT. And those are the measures that produce a school grade for high schools in Florida. Beginning next year, that will be expanded. The FCAT will only be 1/2 of the school grade in the state of Florida. The other half of the school grade will be a combination of graduation rate, participation, and performance on advanced placement, international baccalaureate, participation and performance in dual enrollment, and performance and participation in industry certification programs. It'll also have a measure for performance on SAT and ACT. These various elements will go into the calculation. This will be the other half of a high school's grade. I think you can see from our increased performance on NAEP that accountability has had a significant impact on student achievement, not just as measured by our state-prepared tests, but by national tests that the critics that say we're teaching to the test, we don't teach for NAEP, and or teach to NAEP. These are independent measures of student gains, and you can see the impact of accountability. This transition to a new high school accountability measure that specifically is geared towards college readiness and workforce readiness is going to drive some dramatic changes in behaviors and changes of course offerings in high schools across the state. So there are a number of areas of focus that we're working on currently. This year, for example, I'll back up to that work with American Diploma Project. We are piloting a Algebra 2 test that is in partnership with the other 34 states. It's a standardized test that could be administered going forward. We are examining an Algebra 1 end of course test that would be administered to all of our students that take Algebra 1 and would be aligned to Algebra 1 requirements for college admissions. We are, in our contracts going forward with test development, we'll be developing as many as 12 end-of-course exams, and that will give us, and that will be focused on course-specific content, biology, Algebra 1, Algebra 2, U.S. history, and so forth, that will give us a much clearer snapshot of what the work is in our high schools and the performance of our kids. So these are some of the major pieces that are moving. I think the bottom line is that I anticipate to see a continued increase in the number of students and the diversity, an increase in the diversity of students that are coming to both community college, state college, and four-year universities going forward in Florida that are ready to be received, fill some of those slots that weren't taken perhaps, and are seeking to move on to higher ed. That's the report. No questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Commissioner, thank you for that review, and I appreciate very much your concern about nuts and bolts and how we're going to, in the trenches, really move things forward. I do have a question, though, that I'd like, understood for the record, and that is, will the end of course exams figure into, in any way, the college admission application process as you would see it, or are those strictly internal to be aggregated on a school-by-school basis?
Haven't gotten it, we don't have it on the drawing boards at this point for college admissions issues, but it could. That's yet to be determined. The end of course development is designed to be student specific and would not be part of the high school grade or the aggregate, but would be student specific. There is workaround issues of high school graduation requirements and whether or not these courses, what specific courses are required for graduation. So there'll be some work on those issues.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the Commissioner?
Just, sorry. Commissioner, you had given us some statistics with regard to Hispanics in progress and things of that nature. I don't see them in here. Is there a chance we can get a copy?
Oh, we sure can. We sure, because it's absolutely stunning. It's absolutely stunning.
They sounded remarkable.
And it's the best kept secret in America. We really try to keep the good news quiet. So,
we all get those statistics
I will.
related earlier.
I'll get this to you. I'll try to get it in a more readable form than what I have, but I'll get it to you. It really, the last decade in Florida in K-12 has outperformed the country on NAEP achievement in all measures. Our number 10 ranking by quality counts this last month is partly attributable to our gains in NAEP performance and our dramatic reduction of the achievement gap among our subgroups. And that reduction, the improved achievement of our broad population of students is absolutely critical to our economic future as a state. Again, we are a majority minority student base in K-12. If we don't find the way and the mechanism and have an accountability structure that drives the achievement of all of our children, regardless of economic level or race, that we won't be serving, not only won't we won't serve the students well, but we won't serve the state well going forward. But we'll get you the data.
It's a great news story, and I hope a lot of the media that's here will pick up on that message.
There'll be headlines tomorrow morning.
That's just extraordinary.
It should be.
The numbers you cited are extraordinary.
Madam Chair, if you'll indulge me, this is obviously, this hits home for me in a special way as well. I didn't say before, and they don't need this commercial message, but we are very fortunate to have both our commissioner and our chancellor heading up these two drives. We couldn't do better nationally than the two men we were fortunate to have in Florida overseeing both of these critical functions. And I am, whenever I see the newspaper accounts of what's going on in K through 12, it does my heart a world of good to know that all of those reforms, which have now over 10 years of major reforms which have been put in and are being put into place in the K through 12 system, that many, many people derided when they first began, are now bearing the fruit that many believed they would bear over time. You're never finished, and it always has to continue to change and evolve, but the thing that doesn't are the expectations upon which they're built. And while many people thought it was bumper sticker politics, many people have always believed that all children can learn. But first you have to expect them to, and then you have to organize yourself in a way that will provide them the chance to do it. And when I see things like that placement rating, and while the commissioner will tell you there are other areas in that grading system where we still need to work, and we'll keep evolving. You never get it right. Florida should be immensely proud. In 1994, if you'd have asked any business leader in the state of Florida, what is your greatest lament about economic development in Florida, they would have to a person told you the quality of what's coming out of the K through 12 system. That's not editorial, that's a fact. And now people are able to brag about the things that are happening, and what a huge impact that has when you're trying to lure companies into the state of Florida in terms of workforce and places to put the children of their employees. What a difference it makes, not just in those schools and for those families, but for all of us in the state of Florida. It's wonderful to see these initiatives continue, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we're just about wrapping up our committee, but we still have several items we need to continue. Commissioner Smith also has another presentation coming up on financial access. I guess this is his day.
Right.
The Board of Governors and the State University System have recognized the need for financial aid and have done research to find untapped sources. And while we recognize that is a very, very important part for the students to identify financial aid. So with that, Commissioner, would like to give us a presentation?
Thank you very much. And I'm going to call on Dan Cohen-Vogel to come forward at this time and give this report.
Okay.
I want to punt.
All right, you're going to punt this one. Okay. Dan, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Recognizing that financial support of students really affects both their access and their success in college, we've been engaged in a number of activities, and particularly these research activities that I'll describe to you. The BOG staff, and I should acknowledge with the significant data and number crunching help from researchers at Enlace, Florida, produced these two information briefs in your packet. One is about an opportunity to get more federal financial aid to our lowest income undergraduates, and the other looks at a sizable group of sort of lower middle income students who miss out, who aren't addressed by the bulk of our federal and state grant and scholarship programs, but for whom there's significant financial need, and in some cases more significant unmet financial need than in the lower income categories. And those are the two groups these briefs address. The one brief, entitled "An Opportunity to Get More Federal Aid to Students," estimates that nearly a quarter of our students in the lowest income groups, in the 40,000 under income category, or nearly a quarter of students, I should say, who are likely to be Pell eligible, are not apparently applying for the federal aid, and so are not receiving what we estimate to be at least $24 million in federal grants, and that's a substantial source. And that, I should caveat with, that's just a look at the state university system. So I think Chancellor Holcomb would acknowledge that there's at least as much need in the community college system as well as in the private colleges in Florida. So it looks like we've uncovered a data source that identifies a significant opportunity to get additional aid to our students if we can find ways to get them to apply for that aid. And the other piece, the piece that looks at the portion of our sort of lower middle income students who aren't getting the benefit of various grant and scholarship programs, really identifies a group for whom any kinds of tuition increases and cost of living increases, this group may be particularly sensitive to those. And as we move forward, I think both of these studies identify both short and long-term possibilities for us to both get more aid for students and distribute that aid as efficiently and effectively as possible to meet our students' needs. Governor Martin, that's the extent of my comments.
Okay, thank you. I noticed that in the work program for the Student Affairs Committee, there is an item for financial aid issues. And I think Governor Duncan, your committee will be taking a look at that to see exactly how the Board of Governors universities can help identify both immediate and short-range issues.
Absolutely. I think this is great news for our state that we have potentially more available dollars, and the committee, when we convene here shortly, will be helping tackle that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And the last item, we do have Paul Dossel from Enlace who is here. I think he has a 2-minute presentation that he'd like to present.
Yes, I'll be brief. My name is Paul Dosal, the Executive Director of Enlace, Florida. Thanks to your support a couple of years ago, we were able to assist Dan in his research on the Pell Grant issue. And we think that leaving $24 million in Pell Grants on the table is not acceptable at this time of crisis when our students need every dollar available to them. But I also wanted to let you know that we're actually doing something about it right now, thanks to your support, to get students to apply for and receive that aid. And to tell you more about that, I wanted to bring up Braulio Colon to tell you about College Goal Sunday.
We're punting all over the place. Commissioner Smith, we punted to Ben, and now he's punting to me. But Lasse, Florida is proud to coordinate College Go Sunday. It will be held on February 22nd this year. And College Go Sunday is an event designed to help students and families complete the federal application for financial aid free at a location near them with expert assistance. And I'm proud to say that this year, in Florida, and Lasse, Florida has brought together 32 locations for that weekend, February 22nd. And the locations represent organizations from all over the state that reach the target population. We're talking about some of our universities, which include UCF and University of South Florida. We have organizations like the Urban League of Greater Miami and Palm Beach participating as a location to help these students complete the forms. Aspida, we even have foster youth serving organizations involved in College Go Sunday to help those students complete the forms. So we're excited about it this year. We hope to see it increase as the years go on, and we'd be more happy to answer any questions you have about College Go Sunday. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Certainly. Question?
To members of our board, and Lasse is a major new initiative that we began to support several years ago, and I want to thank Paul and his team because they're doing an excellent job. If we had 4 or 5 more enlaces in this state, I promise you the landscape of education and higher education would be considerably different. So thanks for your good work.
Okay, any other questions on that topic? Okay, if not, moving on, the last item, Commissioner, access to success.
I think we're
Another
back up
punt.
again. Yep.
Forward.
I'll be brief. The National Association of System Heads and the Ed Trust are coordinating this Access to Success initiative, which primarily, as its focus, seeks to cut in half the gaps in access and success between minority students and upper income and lower income students. And there are, I believe, 20 state systems participating, including Florida. And the initiative, I think in your packet there's a table that shows just a summary statewide of those gaps and what they look like. And in some cases in Florida, we look like we're doing pretty well. In others, we have additional work to do. And just as an example of some of the efforts that the initiative is undertaking to address those, and in addition to just keeping a sort of a common set of data that helps us to track how we're doing, there are various other subgroups or interstate working groups that are looking at issues like need-based financial aid, and that's a group that Paul Dosal and I are representing the state university system on, looking at transfer and articulation policies, and that's an area where a lot of other states look to Florida as an example, and cost efficiencies and other aspects of making sure we provide the best services, most efficient services for students to address those gaps.
Okay, thank you.
Good, thank you.
As we end our committee today, I'd like to thank Commissioner Smith and all the presenters for taking the time to come out this morning to present their items. Are there any other questions from the board members to any other presenters? We recognize that there are gaps in the rates in which different groups of our young people earn college degrees, and the board reiterates its commitment to reducing those gaps when we adopt the Forward by Design initiatives. We recognize that universities are facing great challenges by having to make severe budget cuts, and we do hope to minimize the impact of those cuts on access and success of our students as much as possible. I am encouraged that our system is working with systems throughout the country to share ideas and develop solutions. I ask that our committee receive reports periodically on these efforts. I'd like for us to have periodic updates on changes in whatever data to monitor these ongoing activities. The Commissioner will really be pleased to see the information that you discussed earlier and telling the good news story. And oftentimes it's not shared. And with that, Madam Chair, committee adjourned.